I got into the Air Force, got through the tarmac duty, and then we're posted to ITS, Initial Training School, on Gould Street in Toronto for people who would be potential aircrew. Mm-hmm. They didn't specify what branch.
So you could be a pilot, you could be a navigator.
You could be any branch.
Anything. Okay.
Any branch of aircrew, because the initial part of the training covered a lot of common ground.
Okay.
So that got us all used to. We had a big white flash in our hat. Mm-hmm. After you got to go to actually flying, you got a narrow flash.
Okay.
So that showed you had got up.
I've got a picture of my grandfather with that flash.
Yeah. The white flash when
it
was aircrew. And did we ever think we were something else? So, to make a long story short, we got over this marching around and going to Hagersville for tarmac duty. Then we're posted for something real, which was ITS. Mm-hmm. And we went to ITS and spent a few weeks there on Gould Street in Toronto, just one street over from the famous Street of Love, Jarvis Street. And my sister joined on Jarvis Street, the Women's Air Force, who's head together. Mm-hmm. And then I got in and I was posted to ITS. At the end of the ITS, one of the instructors came over and said, "Well, Stewart, we're sending you to nav school." And I said, "Sir, I wanted to become a pilot." He says, "Well, your link marks weren't that good." I said, "Well, I'm surprised to hear that because the link instructor said my coordination was marvelous." He says, "Well, don't get your hopes up. I'll go and ask." Came back 5 minutes later. "You're going to Goddard. Had you mixed up with somebody else?"
Good thing he said something.
Close.
Yeah, kidding.
That close. So we were sent to Goddard, and to go on an airfield. It was a great big grass field, no runways, and they were Tiger Moths. Mm-hmm. A real airplane with two wings, and it looked absolutely gorgeous.
So when was it? So you joined in 1942, was it?
I joined in 42.
You said March of 42.
And I started flying at Goddard. I think it was the first of September. I think I started flying at Goddard.
Okay, so we're still first September 1942.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I went from there to at the end of the course, what did he say now? No, at the end of the course, I went from Goddard to Centralia. Mm-hmm. And from Centralia, I got my wings. Okay. And the instructor came around to me and said, "Stewart, well, congratulations on graduating." And by I'll tell that in a minute. He said, "We're sending you to Summerside." I said, "Sir, I really want to go overseas and fly those airplanes over there. Can't you give that, please, to some married chap?" Mm-hmm. They said, "Well, it's your choice." So I said, "That's what I would prefer, if you don't mind." Came back, "You're going overseas." So it was as simple as that.
So were you excited? You must have been.
Now, a little experience I did have at Centralia, mm-hmm. Flying the Anson was really something awesome too. Like, you could take the Tiger Moth and get hold of the wingtip, the little hand grip, mm-hmm. and shake the whole airplane like that. And the Anson, you could hardly reach it to do that, but it was a lot bigger and heavier. Mm-hmm. But it was a great airplane, and they were brand new Mark II Ansons. At one time, a Tiger Moth came in and parked beside the Anson. It looked so small. So during the time in Centralia, we did a lot of stuff that helped us to prepare to fly the operational kind of airplanes. Mm-hmm. So on one of those trips, I was sent up to do some practice forced landings, solo, at a place called Hensel, mm-hmm. near Centralia, which was the official farmers' forced landing field. The farmer loaned it out. So we would go in there, we'd practice precautionary landings and forced landings. So I went over, it was a very misty day, no horizon. I found Hansel. I got up to a couple of thousand feet, off came the throttle, and I started to glide around to do a practice forced landing. I was coming in, I could hear another airplane. And as I straightened out, my nose and starboard engine caught the port wing of an Anson, and the starboard wing caught his tail, and he went in upside down. Yeah. I slammed into the ground ahead of him, or just beyond him. All the wreckage was in the farmer's field, right to the fence. My undercarriage was torn off. And I got out of the airplane. I have to say, I was feeling terrible. I thought I'd killed the poor guy. And I went over the wreck where you'd hardly recognize it as an airplane. And the instructor was hanging out from under the wreck, bleeding from his face, done, and swearing like a trooper because he's wrecking his best blues uniform. I crawled into the top of the airplane, up to where the student was. He was stuck there with a broken leg. But we were all alive. Of course, the word got back to the station that amid a collision, both airplanes burned, everybody dead. So the farmer's wife came out with milk and and so forth, and waited for the guys to get there to pick us up. So I got taken back to there. I got my parachute. It took me, I'm not even sure I had the parachute done up. But it took me back to Mount Hope. I'm carrying my parachute, going back across the hangar. The guys are coming, but you're dead,
I think they've seen a ghost.
But they said they had not heard the news. So that night, I was going into Goderich, going into Exeter to go to a show. And I noticed that the officer that picked me up was the one who was in charge of the accident investigation. So I said, "Sir, I understand that you are in charge in investigating this morning's accident." He says, "Yes, I am." I said, "Would you mind telling me how it's coming along?" He said, "Well, what business is it of yours?" I said, "Well, I was flying the solo airplane." "And you're going to a show?" He said, "It's a closed matter." And I've heard nothing since.
Oh, that's good.
So obviously I wasn't blamed. It was just two different flights, authorized, two different activities in the same field without a horizon.
Yeah.
And so...
It was an accident.
Just an accident, yeah. So
I suppose, especially given the wartime nature of it, A, accidents happen, B, there's probably a little more tolerance, I would say.
In wartime, they did not make the big deal of it.
Yeah.
But of course, if there's anybody killed, it's a pretty serious,
different story.
Thing. I just have the accident report here.
Oh, okay.
Which you may want to see.
For sure.
No, I've got it in the other room.
No, that's okay.
I'll get it, but I'll show that to you.
Yeah, we can.
But it's straight cut and forth, just a white form, and the accident reports and so forth. I'm just going to get it. I'll show it to you after.
We can videotape that. My grandfather's the same thing. He ground looped to Harvard. Yeah.
Well, that's how I started flying at Harvard. A friend of mine, Stan Pfister, had a Harvard. He ground looped it all over southern Ontario.
So I call him a pilot maker.
He's a pilot maker, but my understanding, it hasn't been proven, but I've always had the feeling, Steve, that if you can fly the Harvard, you can fly anything with propellers. Because my friend Bob Smith, who was a great Harvard instructor, a fantastic Spitfire pilot, he was over in France and did all kinds of stuff, never got a thing for it. All his COs got knocked off, so nobody to recommend him for DFCs and that sort of thing. But he was a marvelous, marvelous instructor, and he showed me the instant feel exercise. Mm-hmm. And I took it beyond that and applied it to all the airplanes I flew. I can fly one today. I was 18 years between Mustang flights, and I took it off without a problem.
And you did that instant feel exercise you explained to me?
Yeah, I went down to Mississippi and took it out of the farmer's field and brought it back for Gary McCann. It was CFFUK. They rescinded it and made it CFFUZ. Okay. And I'm the only person who flew that registration. But anyway...
let's get back to the...
yes.
So you had this accident in this mishap, let's say, and you were still at Centralia.
I was at Centralia, yes. But needless to say, they came over from Trenton, and the visiting flight came through, and the first thing they do is say, "Where is he?" So I had to go up with a visiting flight. So take me over to where the accident is. So I flew over there and flew down and showed them where it was and so forth. Oh my goodness! So they didn't do anything as far as it's a closed matter. Yeah. So, but to think you could have something like that, a major collision, and just sort of walk away from it is remarkable.
That's amazing. But how high were you guys when you clipped? So is it like you right in the flare?
About 300 feet.
Oh wow!
So, but we were descending.
Yeah.
And he was like this, and he can't see right above him. And I was like this, I couldn't see below. So we both came together like this. Bang! Wow. Just a tremendous coincidence. You've seen the one where the one came in on top of the other. That's a very famous one. This is not necessarily a famous one, but it's unique in the sense that nobody was killed. One guy broke his leg. The instructor had minor injuries, but dirtied his suit, and I wasn't hurt. I don't know whether I hit my head or something, but anyway, that was my accident for that time, and it had no bearing on whether I would I knew this was the end of my flying, but no, carried on as usual and finished the course. Good. So finishing the course for me to get my wings was just the most awesome experience for somebody who thought he'd never get in, and let alone graduate. And so many of the pilots that came into the Air Force were pilots before, some were commercials. So I said to myself, Steve, if I'm being given information on whatever course comes next, they're not getting it any faster than I am. So all I have to do is listen very carefully, study carefully. As you say, get up an hour earlier, go to bed an hour later. So I studied very carefully everything that was shown to me. So it was not that hard.
How intense was the training? Because obviously there's a war going on and they want to get you guys out and fighting.
Well, let's say it's not like today where you take maybe a couple of years or whatever it is. It was intense enough, but it's intense because they had to get you through. So you had to hurry. I would say that Goderich was like a wasp's nest.
Oh, I bet.
And just 20 on approach, and we had to sort of get in and touch down, and away we would go.
With no radios.
No radio, no radio, but it sure made you look.
Oh yeah.
The 20-hour test.
That would have been good training for being in operations. Like you must have had eyes in the back of your head, always looking just for.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Look out, Paul, at the back. Bang. So I remember my instructor said, Mr. Bailey, civilian instructor, said, when you're going up with this flying officer who's going to give you your 20-hour test, make sure that if he cuts your edge that you get your stick forward. So we're soon after takeoff, he cut my that, bang! He said, hey, what are you doing? No, but he said, take me back to the aerodrome. No, he got up to 3,000 feet. He said, do a spin to the left. I said, no, sir. He says, maybe you didn't hear me right. I said he had a Gosport tube, you know. He said, do a spin to the left. I said, no, sir. He said, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do a spin to the left, right now. I said, no, sir. Take me back to the airfield. Went back to the airfield and went storming up to my instructor. And my instructor, I said, the reason that he didn't do that is I taught him, don't go below 5,000 feet before you want to do a spin. So that was good airmanship. Mm-hmm. So I was exercising, for me, mm-hmm. the airmanship that I was showing. Nothing was said about it.
Yeah.
And I passed my 20-hour test, and I got out of there. Then the amazing thing is going to Centralia, having all that stuff happen, and then at the end we had like 100 people on the course, flight A, flight and B flight. They wanted us to list the guys in our flight in the order at which you think they should get a commission.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. I was 19.
Wow.
And I got a commission.
Wow.
I could not believe it. As a matter of fact, I was going downtown in Hamilton, right by the Wright House. A couple of soldiers came along and saluted me, and
you didn't know what to do.
Well, I had my uniform on for the first day. They came back and said, "Sir, do you not believe in returning salutes?" Oh, I said, "Gentlemen, please forgive me. This is the first day I've had this on. Would you please come into Renter's and let me buy you a pop?" So we went in there, we had a good chat.
Oh, that's nice.
They told me about them and their training and me about ours. So they were gracious about it. But, you know, I was so naive. I was a delivery boy on a bicycle,
mm-hmm.
making $5 a week and paying $4 board. So when I went in there and got $1.30 a day, that was great.
That was great.
And I never smoked.
Oh, well, that's very good. So, were you still 18 at this time, or were you 19? Like
March the 11th, March the 10th I joined in 1942. March the 11th I graduated in 1943.
Okay.
And then from there we went overseas, and we went to Grantham in the summertime, and September the 1st I started flying the Mosquito.
Okay, so before that you would have flown the Blenheim?
Before I got overseas, and almost immediately, well, soon thereafter, after going over by sea, we took the course on the Blenheims at Grantham. We flew the Blenheim Mark I, the short-nose Blenheim, left over from the Battle of Britain, and we did a couple of rides in the Mark IV, the Bolingbroke, and the Mark V, the Bisley.
Okay.
Hardly anybody flew those airplanes.
No, I don't even think I've even heard of a Bisley, which is... I don't even think I've even heard of a Bisley personally.
No, it was a long pointed nose.
Okay.
So we got to fly those airplanes, and to me, it even smelled operational. And then I looked at it pinched my finger when it raised the gear when I was looking at it, and it was up on a hoist. They were doing an inspection.
Oh,
but we had one guy that took off, and after takeoff, up he went like this, stalled, and killed himself at Grantham.
Oh my!
On that, and that was pretty scary.
No kidding.
And while we were there, believe it or not, this Lancaster came in with a great big hole in its belly. Guy Gibson, after doing the raid,
like
the bomb,
the Guy Gibson right after the Dam Busters raid.
Yes.
Wow.
He landed there to go and see Bomber Harris at Grantham.
Wow.
And I saw him get out of the airplane. And the other thing about the Blenheim, it's those engines, I forget what they were, it doesn't really matter. But at the end of the field, the grass field, you'd hear this just a hiss, and it come down, and that's what it was like. And I never forget that. And as I mentioned, everybody wanted to be a Mosquito pilot, but I just loved the Blenheim too for everything it was. But this guy doing that and going in was pretty discouraging. But pure pilot error. I think the engine may have quit it. He tried to get back and
pounded it in.
And he went. But,
so You mentioned when you went before the selection committee, and they said, "Well, you can't be a Spitfire pilot," and you said, "I really want to fly Mosquito."
Yes.
Why? What was the allure of the Mosquito to you?
Well,
was it
when the Mosquito first came into being, it was the fastest airplane in the world, and it could carry a 2,000-pound bomb to Berlin. Ended up carrying a 4,000-pound bomb to Berlin. And it was the most exciting thing. I loved the tiger moth. It had the same shaped tail. Look at the Mosquito.
Yep.
Same shaped tail.
Yep.
And I just wanted to fly it so badly. I wanted to be a pilot so badly. Then, having become a pilot, I would have been satisfied to be sent to anything. To go on to the intermediate step, which they usually go to a Wellington and then to the other. We went to a Blenheim and then to the either bullfighter or the bullfighter would have been fine, except you're sitting up there all by yourself, and great big engines here and there. That would have been fine doing a tail like that, but I wanted to fly. I didn't want to fly night fighters defensively over England. I wanted to fly aircraft over enemy territory.
You wanted to get at the Germans, essentially.
I wanted to fly operations. And that was a dream, you know. I knew the consequences could be very, very bad. But to me, I had no commitments. My family was safe at home. My British comrades with whom I flew, their families were in harm's way. So they had a lot more to lose, and I learned an awful lot in attitude by seeing them and knowing them.
How was the interaction? Because you obviously you were RCF, but you were now basically in an RAF squadron.
Yes.
How was the interaction? I mean, there must have been some good, collegial ribbing.
When we went to the Grantham to fly the Blenheim, we had this adjutant. He said, "You Commonwealth people, we don't need you," the adjutant.
Sure you don't.
So says, as far as we're concerned, we can do this job. We don't need you. And frankly, I resent your being here. So somebody got him with a pail of water on the door. Not only that, he got posted out.
Yeah.
Because that was no way to treat people. Like, we had New Zealanders, Australian, South African, Dutch people that were coming to fly, and they were my squadron mates and classmates in various training. And it was just, one time I was doing low flying with my instructor. We were down by Windsor. We were under the Detroit-Windsor Bridge. He said, "Oh, what the hell?" We went under the bridge.
Oh, that's awesome.
With my instructor.
That's awesome.
Oh, God, that is fantastic. Shh, don't tell anybody.
It never happened. Oh,
but to have experiences like that, you don't forget. And then one day, after the war, we were flying the Harvards going to Montreal in the reserve squadron. We came down the river towards Trenton, line astern, under the Ivy Lee Bridge. Landed at Trenton, and I think, 10 airplanes. We all got on I was the last one in on the shortest runway at Trenton, and turned off at the last. And Schlemmen was there, who was a real fuss nut, and congratulated us. But
I don't think you get away with that these days.
We were on the way in. Yeah. Another guy was in distress and said, Mayday, and we were on approach, and saw the airplane turn over, and he crashed, and everybody was killed.
Oh, is this in the
Trenton?
Oh, in Trenton. Okay, this is after the war.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that was very disturbing.
Yeah.
But we were privy to so many things that were just beyond coincidence. It was so amazing. I went up to Chicoutimi, Bagotville, and did some training there. Flew the T-33 for the only time that I was able to fly it, and got to do continuous aileron, 5 rolls before the nose came down. But going straight up or straight down, there's no lift. So on the trajectory, a parabola, there's no lift. If you fly like a dart going to a target, there's perfect aileron rolls. So I did that with airplanes, and I taught myself aerobatics on the Mosquito doing that. And I used it as a safety measure. If you're in doubt, I got over gutter slow. The stuff was coming up, searchlights and black as night, and my gyros are all tumbled, and I look up and see the North Star. I said, oh God, well, home is that way. Whipped around this way and got home in the right direction.
Wow.
So that it teaches you to look for fortune.
That's, well, especially born out of your experience. So you're at the OTU, Operational Training Unit, on the Blenheim and the Beaufighter? I did the
AFU, the Advanced Flying Unit on the Blenheims.
Okay.
Blenheim 1, 4, and 5. 35 hours.
Okay.
I had 247 total hours when I went to the Mosquito.
Okay.
Today that might not seem very much, but it was adequate in those days.
Yep.
So I went to the Mosquito, 249 hours, and I think I maybe took 4 hours or something like that.
So what was it like the first time you saw Mosquito and you knew you were going to fly it?
It was the most awesome thing that I had ever seen. I just couldn't believe it. The one thing I did do is I remember taking the tiger moth by the wingtip and doing that. And with the Anson, I could move the wing a little doing that. Went to the Mosquito. It's like a cement.
He's not moving anywhere.
22,000 pounds. There was 17,000 or 18 for the trainers. But
is that empty or is that fully loaded? Fully loaded was 17,000 pounds?
Fully loaded, they got up to over 23,000 pounds.
Wow.
So we flew them at 22,000, something like that, a little more for the others. But I think absolutely empty with nothing in them, I think was 16,000 pounds or something like that. I just forgot. I got the pilot's notes. But anyway, it was just like cement. And I wondered, how in the heck can they ever get this thing off the ground? It just like, bang, nothing, bang, bang. And then they had a little door on the side and a stiffener across the top of the door. They had one that broke in half. They found that bulkhead was weak. So they put a stiffener across the door, and that saved it. It was underneath the door, I guess. But, it's... the door was here for those airplanes. Not the entry door, the door to get into the back.
Okay.
We got in under here.
Okay. Let's just turn it to the camera, and then so these guys can, whoever's watching can see. Yeah. So the door to get in the back was back here, basically.
The door for access to the
bomb bay.
For the door to get in to see whether the controls are loose and everything. That's part of the walk around.
Okay.
To look in the back and up and hear at the radios and stuff. As the crew, because of the cannons and the machine guns, they got in through a door at the side here.
Okay.
And that's how it worked out.
So you went to but now were you on squadron at this point, or were you still training? Were you, I guess, would have been an OTU at this point, or?
I went to the OTU on Mosquitoes.
Okay.
And I finished OTU the very end of November 1943, when they asked for volunteers to go to the Middle East.
Okay.